eNCA's Lester Kiewit, who's tracking this story for us in Paarl. Lester, good morning to you. Talk to me about these Nelson Mandela rules for the treatment of prisoners. What's it all about?
Well, Kole, the 122 rules in terms of the treatment of prisoners has already been adopted by the United Nations, and this is the South African launch, also to coincide with the centenary celebrations of former President Nelson Mandela. These rules range from everything from the transportation, the treatment, the sanitation facilities available to prisoners, also to conventions regarding the level of punishment and treatment that prisoners are and their rights are supposed to be adhered to. It's quite significant that we are standing here outside the now Drakenstein Correctional Centre, formerly the Victor Verster Prison. That is where former President Nelson Mandela spent the last years incarceration just before his release in 1991. So it's quite symbolic that the Department of Correctional Services adopt these South African version of those 121 Nelson Mandela rules here at the Drakenstein Correctional Centre. We do understand that the Minister of Correctional Services will be here. They'll be unveiling a plaque at the home or close to the home of where Nelson Mandela spent his last few months in incarceration. And it's all about South Africa signing up to those UN conventions, adopting those rights of prisoners for people in incarceration.
All right, Lester, what time is this event meant to take place, and who will be joining the Correctional Services Minister?
Sorry, Tole, a bit difficult to hear you as some of the buses are arriving here now, but this is expected to start at about 10 a.m. this morning. But lots of questions also to be asked of the Minister about the adopting of these rules, especially since the recognition not only by his department but also the Department of Correctional Services about the level of overcrowding at South Africa's prisons. In last year's or this year's annual report of the Department of Corrections, they say that 161,000 people are incarcerated in South Africa's 243 prisons already. That there have been a court case, if we remember, in 2015, the Western Cape High Court ordering the Department of Correctional Services to relieve the pressure on the Paarl prison here in Cape Town, where it was found that it was 150% overcrowded. So lots of questions to be asked of the Minister, just exactly how they intend to adopt these Nelson Mandela rules, especially since the Department of Corrections sits with its own problems regarding the treatment and the housing of prisoners in South Africa's 243 prisons.
Thank you very much, Lester Kiewit, for that brief background. And as you can see behind him, he spoke about the arrivals of those delegates, or should we say representatives from the UN, who we understand will be joining the Minister of Justice and Correctional Services as they launch that particular event at about 10 this morning. Well.